also within the Exemplar project, we have some more intervention work, which is quite focused really. Some of it's on anxiety management, some of it's group work for people. There are some other BPI, so brief psychological interventions, which are one-to-one. And the primary care mental health service, so my team, we have access to refer into those interventions where other services may not be able to. So if you were seen in A&E, for example, or by the crisis team, they may not be able to refer in to those. So there is that sort of extra benefit of coming to see us in primary care mental health service. It's such a long title. It's a bit waffly. Yeah, so I don't know if that's helpful. I guess in terms of sort of how to access support in more emergency situations, that can be helpful for people to know. Just stick it on the fridge, have it in the back of your mind. So there's always the first response service, their 111 option 2. There is liaison psychiatry in the hospital. We wouldn't always advise going there because it can be quite a stressful environment for people. But the first response service, they will come out and see you at home. They initially triage over the phone, but they aim to get back in touch with people in 4 hours, so pretty fast. We're a little bit slower in primary care mental health service. You may be looking, we aim to speak to you as soon as possible. The standard is 2 weeks, but we often get to people much before then.
Yeah, that's it.
I think so, in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Emily. Honestly speaking, you share a very useful information. I'm sure parents carers will be happy to hear that. Not only parents carers, but other people also, they will be definitely interested in that one. Yeah, because everybody needs GP, and everybody wants how to access their GP. So, which is really, really important. We appreciate it so much. Definitely, thank you very, very, very much for having you today. Yeah, if anybody have a question for Emily, Karen, have you have any question for Emily? Is any question?
I must have done a good job then.
Yeah,
or maybe just
it looks like
everyone.
Everybody is happy about it and everybody understood everything, you know. Yeah, fantastic job. Thank you very, very much, Emily, for having you today.
Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, you absolutely genius. Thank you so much. Yeah. So now we will move to the next person called Jonathan Wells from Rethink Charity, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Yeah, Jonathan, over to you, please.
Thanks very much. Yes, so I'm Jonathan Wells, and we'll follow on. I've worked with Emily a little bit, so I'll follow on from what she's had to say.
Good.
It would be helpful to me. I don't quite have a sense of how many people are in the meeting, and whether any of those people have children with special educational needs. Send children.
We have now 10 people in the meeting, but I think there are people who have children.
So did you say 7? We've got 7 people in the meeting.
Yeah, Jonathan, even if they are not here, things are recorded. We are recording everything, and we will share it with them because.
Okay.
Yes.
I think following on from Emily, the sort of theme of this morning is a lot to do with mental health. So I'll talk about some specific services, but I've already sent through to Judita a leaflet about what we do in Rethink Carer Support, because I think we all need to acknowledge when people just sort of talk about lots of stuff, it's quite difficult to just take it in. So it helps to follow it up with some written information. So Judita can send that out afterwards.
Just 1 minute. I don't know if you can see. If you can see it already.
Yes. Well, don't worry. That's great. I will just describe this. So it's great to have this chance to meet a few parents of children with difficulties in Peterborough, and I hope what I have to say will help you all get the help that you need. Some of these things are more directly relevant than others. So I'm just going to, what is now on the screen is what I've also sent as an email document, so it can go out to everybody. So around the subject of mental health, it's a very big subject. There's an awful lot of people with mental health difficulties nowadays. COVID is an important part of that. People are talking more about their mental health challenges now than they used to, and that's a very healthy thing. But it also means, sadly, that more and more people, especially young people, are feeling that they really do have mental health difficulties and need help, and that can be actual clinical treatment from the NHS. So it's a very busy time, but at least we are talking to each other about each other's mental health. I have various roles, actually. I worked for 34 years in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Mental Health Services. I'm now retired. I'm a parent carer. A lot of people don't like the word carer. I don't much like it. I'm just a dad. But two of our sons, who are now adults, have had some mental health difficulties. So I'm very committed to the idea of families needing as much support as possible to do the right things for their loved ones.
Oh, thank you so much.
So Rethink is quite a big national charity, but what we do in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is what I run, which is called Rethink Carer Support. And as it says on the front of the leaflet, we are for the families and friends of people with mental health conditions. At the moment, that tends to mean that the person with the mental health difficulties is an adult. So I know that for you in Family Voice, your concerns are about your children. But sadly, if you're worried about the mental health of a young person, it could well be that they might still need, you might need support, and they might need support through their teenage years and possibly even beyond that. So what we do in Rethink Carer Support is we are all experts because of our own experience. We've all been through it, because families who are struggling to do the right thing for a son or daughter with mental health difficulties often feel very isolated and misunderstood. So in Rethink Carer Support, we've all been there. We also know our way around the local mental health system, which Emily outlined for us a few minutes ago. It can be quite complicated finding the right service at the right time for your loved one. So in Rethink Carer Support, we do a lot of helping people just get the best service for their loved one. So I don't want to talk at great length about Rethink Carer Support. We are mostly for, as I said, the families of adults with mental health conditions, but we do overlap with what happens, for example, in Family Voice. Family Voice helps parents of anybody with SEND needs, including mental health difficulties, feel supported and feel that they have a voice in getting better services. So I work closely alongside Louise and the rest of Family Voice. For if there's anybody who lives in Cambridgeshire, we also overlap with Pinpoint, who are the equivalent of Family Voice in Cambridgeshire. I'm just going to pause for a moment in case there are any questions or comments about what I've said so far, and specifically about Rethink Carer Support. And having paused, I will go on then, if I may, and I just want to say a few things about some other services. And don't worry if you don't take all of this in, because we can send links to places where this is all written down. Yeah. Online, there are a couple of very good places to find out about all the services that might help you. And everything I say is actually about mental health. So Emily's already mentioned Hay Peterborough, Hay in capital letters Peterborough. They have a website, and they're particularly about any resource that might help people with their mental health in the Peterborough area. And everyone, and for example, we in Rethink Carer Support feature on that website. Everyone on the website has to have sort of made I think the word would be a pledge to listen well to people with mental health difficulties and get alongside them to help them address their mental health challenges. So in terms of online information following up on this session, Hay Peterborough is an important resource to remember. There's a second website specifically for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough called Keep Your Head. So if you Google Keep Your Head, actually the first thing you find is nothing to do with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough mental health. But you know, if you Google Keep Your Head Peterborough or whatever, you will find this specialist website where a lot of work goes into actually maintaining it and updating it, because the trouble with that sort of information is it quite easily gets out of date. So alongside Hay Peterborough, please remember Keep Your Head. As I'm talking, I'm just thinking it might help if Judita or Usman just sort of keeps a note of one or two of these sort of websites, just so that we somehow get this out to people following this morning. Yeah. There is also, I mean, as we've already heard from Emily, she works for CPFT. They are the NHS provider of services. They have their own website with a lot of information on it. I'll now just say a little bit, imagining that I am the parent of, let's say, a young person whose mental health is really worrying me. I have been in that situation, but I live in Cambridgeshire, and when I remember those days, they are about 10 years ago for me personally. But I know that people who are involved with Family Voice, you are the people who are in the thick of it, trying to make sense of what you're dealing with. I know that special educational needs can sometimes be about learning disabilities or physical disabilities, but also that it can be about people's mental health. So I'll just carry on talking in this way, but if people want to wave at any point and have more of a conversation, I'd be delighted to do that. You may be trying to cope with a child or teenager and make sense of the difficulties that they have. GPs, some GPs are great for mental health, some are not so good, but in any practice there should be at least one GP who has a good understanding of what you might be going through. So you may well be talking to a GP early on. The trouble with mental health is that it's a very broad spectrum, a bit like our physical health. None of us have perfect physical health, but some of us are in massive pain, or there are bits of our bodies that just aren't working, whereas others have much milder difficulties which may pass. Mental health is similar, so it's very hard for me in a couple of minutes to summarize what you might be dealing with. Most often it will be the anxieties and the problems with mood that children may be having, and that could well be related to COVID, There has been an increase in those sorts of mental health difficulties, both locally and nationally, since COVID. But it's not only because of COVID, it's because of all sorts of other factors. There are certain things that might help or not help, you know, staying as calm as you can and keeping a relation, however upset or possibly angry your child might be, keeping a good relationship going rather than having, you know, arguments and falling out with each other. That's obviously helpful, but it's easier said than done. And then just providing that stability that we all aim to do as parents, and that confidence really that things will pass. So I won't go on about that. We could have a broader discussion about that, but you might feel you're really struggling. So a GP is an obvious first point of call, but also quite often schools, teachers. My wife for many years was a teaching assistant, and she got to know the children she was working with pretty well. There are now mental health support teams being developed. There are 4 already in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and ultimately there are going to be 10. So rather than teachers just trying to make sense of what might be troubling a child, there are NHS staff available to them. Not everywhere yet, but certainly in large parts of Peterborough. This is a new service, recognising that if a child is struggling with their mental health, they're not going to get on so well socially or academically at school. Then, so just going through this sort of list, the most unwell children and young people might need really expert clinical care and treatment. And that would come from CPFT, which we've already mentioned, not the part that Emily works for, because Emily works with adults, but there is a completely separate service for children and young people with mental health difficulties. The trouble is there are significant waiting times to access that. And this morning, I don't want to sort of pretend that everything is easy to access. It isn't, and it would be unfair of me to pretend that it is. Alongside what CPFT provide, there are some great voluntary organisations who specialise in working therapeutically with children and young people. You might have come across Centre 33, who work out of offices in the city centre at Peterborough, as well as other sites in Cambridgeshire. And I don't know the Ormiston Trust very well, but they also work with children and young people with emotional problems. And I think they're active in Peterborough, but somebody may correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to say, I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, so I'll say 1 or 2 other things and then we'll have a pause. So what I just outlined in terms of services is a range between the NHS and the voluntary sector. GPs have sometimes struggled in a similar way actually to parents to know which is the right service for a particular child at a particular point. So since the 1st of July, in other words, 3 weeks ago, GPs now have just one place to contact to refer a child or young person. It's actually called United, but spelt in capital letters Y-O-U, and then after the U, United. So it's called United. I've just seen a question on the chat, which is great, so I will come back to that. So if you're getting a bit desperate and no one seems to be listening and you're sitting in front of a GP, educate your GP and say, don't worry about which particular service. There are people called United. You just send off a referral to them and they will organise the right service. There might still be a waiting list, but this is a new thing from the 1st of July, and it's designed to make things easier for parents, children and young people themselves, and GPs. So I wanted to highlight that. And finally, at this point, in terms of services, because this morning is about you knowing more about what's out there, coming back to the word carer, or let's just say families or parents, there are some very good services that support you as a carer. Family Voice obviously do that. What I do in Rethink Carer Support is about supporting families. There is an organisation which we mentioned on our leaflet called Making Space, which is also about supporting the families of adults with mental health conditions. And we also mention on, it's probably back on page 1 of this leaflet, which we've still got up, in fact, what I'm talking about now. So we might just, as I'm talking, yes. So what I'm referring to is on the left-hand column of what's now on your screens, I'm talking about Rethink Mental Illness. I've just mentioned Making Space, who support the carers of adults with mental health conditions. They work very much in Peterborough as well as Cambridgeshire. And the biggest organisation for carers of any age is Caring Together. But recognising that the term, millions and millions of us have a carer role. It might be for a child that we have, it might be for our partner, or very often it might be for our mum and dad, quite often when they are elderly, possibly suffering from a dementia. And people in middle age will often be what nowadays is called a sandwich carer, when you have children that you're desperately trying to do the right thing for, and your own parents are still alive, but you may be trying to organise care for them. So this term carer encompasses, well, some of us actually think more than half the population. In other words, maybe 30 million out of 50 million. The numbers are huge. So don't feel, my main message is, as a parent carer, don't feel on your own. There are resources for you. There are also resources for your loved one. It's still not as simple to access as it might be, but we are working hard to clarify and simplify how your child gets the help that they need. I'm going to pause at this point. I just want to check out with anybody who I can see. Could you nod if the way I'm talking is helpful? Or
Definitely, yes.
Because it's very encouraging when you're talking at a screen to get just that little bit of feedback. Right, so I'll just check with the chat. And that's great from, is this you, Karen? Anyway, from Kat, I've had a question, which is great, because I'm very keen that we have a conversation this morning as far as we can. So we've had a question which says, which service would be best for a young adult, ASD, which would be autism spectrum disorder, self-harming? That's a very good question, and very real, actually, because I recognize that sort of scenario from the people I support in Rethink. So the question is about, I can go into the detail if the questioner wants me to, but somebody might be, let's just say 20, like my son was. My son was diagnosed with Asperger's at that age. So they have a diagnosis. It can be quite hard getting a diagnosis, but I'm afraid there are massive numbers of people now recognised, female as well as male, who may have maybe on the autism spectrum. Can I just stress that autism isn't a mental illness. It's just a way that your brain is wired. So it's unfair on people with autism to treat them as if they've got an illness that can be treated and cured. They are simply different in some ways. The difference brings with it strengths. In other words, they can be brilliant at maths and brilliant at completing. They have very high IQ, sometimes very organized, very clear thinking, very good intellectually, but not always so good at social life and emotional life. So yes, so 20, I'm just using that. I'm talking in general terms. But so please, for everybody, as including Kat, the first point is, and I'm sure Kat knows this already, autism isn't an illness. It's a way that you're neurologically wired, or the way your brain is wired. But along with being autistic, it's quite likely that that individual will struggle, because they will just find it really hard to cope with things that many of us take for granted. And that may express itself in self-harming. That's really quite common. Or it may be depression, anxiety, quite often a certain amount of obsessional compulsive disorder, being so keen to be organized and that everything is exactly right, that becomes a little bit out of control. I'm talking about OCD. And finally, people might be labeled with having what's called a personality disorder, which is actually not always a very helpful label for doctors to use, but that does happen. So the question is about what service would be best. I'll give a short answer, but I'm happy to leave, well, the contact details. I can give my email address after this morning, because I'm very happy to have more personal conversations with people about this who might need it. So in general terms, and I'm afraid I'll be honest, which means not always giving you perhaps the hope you might need. Some NHS staff are very good at appreciating that someone might be both autistic and very desperate and therefore self-harming. Other staff in the NHS or social services are not so good. If someone is self-harming, that they are very distressed, that needs to be taken seriously. Obviously, sometimes it means journeys backwards and forwards to A&E if someone is cutting themselves or taking an overdose. In A&E, as well as stitching up the cat or whatever it might be, those staff should be able to think about what is behind this sort of behaviour. And Emily mentioned earlier Liaison mental health services. Liaison means really mental health experts working with people in general hospitals. So they are a resource that can be used in A&E. A&E can be a very busy place, and that doesn't always work smoothly. So somebody might just be sent home again. The services that might help for a 20-year-old, my recommendations would be, first, people can self-refer or be referred to what's called psychological well-being service. the jargon is awful in mental health. And whenever I mention something like that, if it was me, I would find it very hard to remember. But anyway, on the CPFT website, pretty much on their homepage, it says psychological well-being, self-refer. You can do that. I've done it for myself this year because I suffer with depression, and I've had some good help from that service. They should be able to provide psychological help to someone if they feel they are depressed, whether they are autistic or not. My impression is they're not always very good at adjusting what they do for people who are autistic, I'm afraid. And that's why I'm personally involved on behalf of parents with a lot of work at the moment to get staff better trained to understand how you should adjust what you're doing if the person you're dealing with is autistic. I feel very strongly about this, and we're not going to give up on this, but it's been a long battle. So I've mentioned psychological wellbeing service. It should, I don't know if Emily is still on this call, but Emily works for primary care mental health service, yes. And, you know, if a GP is worried about somebody like this, and obviously I don't have the details, the PCMH, Primary Care Mental Health Service, is there partly to help GPs make sense of what's happening and then get the right service involved. So I hope Emily feels that she and her colleagues will have some grasp of when someone is autistic, they can also be mentally unwell, but they just might need a slightly different way of engaging with them. I won't this minute put Emily on the spot about that, but that is another way to first see a mental health professional like Emily, and then for Emily to think hard about what is the right service. I don't think Emily would pretend that it's always very smooth or perfect getting the right service, but what Emily's colleagues do is very much intended to improve things compared to how they were a couple of years ago. I hope I'm putting that in a balanced way.
Jonathan, yeah, absolutely. Sorry to sort of interject.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please do.
But it might just, yeah, it might be helpful. Absolutely. Often, you know, people are complex, aren't they? Aren't we all? We don't just sort of have one. There's not just one part of us, and I think it's really important to just be aware that yes, you know, you might have an assessment. We might think at that time this is the right direction, but it doesn't mean we don't come back. It doesn't mean that it's just that and that's all. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
maybe not.
Well, that's right. It's not straight. It's not easy, and from a parent's point of view,
Sure.
and I've been there, and people on the call have been there. If people are frustrated or impatient or indeed angry sometimes, having been a mental health professional myself, I probably didn't keep as calm as I always should have done. But you know, a good mental health professional understands where that frustration is coming from. They don't judge. You know, they hang in there and they do the best that they can. I'll just add one other thing, because actually there's so many important things that we're talking about this morning, and I do hope the recording can be used as widely as possible. The two biggest things going on around autism across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. One is about training. CPFT have assured me this week that they are developing a training package for hundreds, if not, I mean, there are more than 3,000 staff in CPFT. And I said, when is it going live and is it for everybody? And I didn't get an answer to that question, but anyway, that work is going on. So training is really important, but the other important initiative is actually about getting a diagnosis in the first place. It's been in the last 10 years, there's been some sort of, well, I don't know what, explosion almost in people who this includes children, may be autistic, and very worrying to parents and teachers. There's an excellent service in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but it's got way, way behind with the demand for assessment, because there is a lot of skill in making these assessments. Mental health can sometimes make diagnoses, you could say, a bit too quickly, and diagnoses can have negative impacts as well as positive. So there's new money, there's new investment in the assessment service. This applies probably even more actually to adults who may be autistic, to children. But anyway, there is new investment into that so that they can reduce the waiting list. For people who are in desperate need, the funders have also made it possible in some special cases for people to be sent somewhere else, maybe to London, to get their assessment rather than joining a queue, which can be a year or two long. I think it's a year or two. I don't want to throw too many facts out if they're not accurate, but when I last heard it was over a year. So there are slight improvements with all of that, but from a parent's point of view, and I speak as a parent, there are still frustrations, because reducing a problem over a number of years doesn't help with things that are actually going on now. Are there any other, so in terms of a conversation, I'd be very happy to hear from anybody else or anyone who's already contributed about this or any other area.
Is there any correction for Jonathan?
If there isn't, I'll just make, I think, I'll just say mention one other thing, Usman.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go on, please.
And then we'll see if there's anything else we need to do.
Thank you.
So as I've got the chance, I'm mentioning one other thing. I have various roles. So I'll mention two other things. The other roles I'm involved in, just make plugs for those, as this morning is about people being better informed about what's going on out there. There are people called the Sun Network. That's an independent organisation which covers Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I'm the chair of the Sun Network, and the Sun Network is what's called a voice organisation. So there are 4 or 5 paid staff in the Sun Network, and their job is to go out, whether that means online in the last year or in person when they can go out in person, to talk to people with mental health difficulties. And that could well be parent carers. Quite a lot of parent carers involved with Family Voice will be suffering. I say this with confidence, with anxiety or depression. I've done some, you could call it research within Rethink, and we know that it's known nationally that at least 50% of people in a carer role suffer with anxiety and depression. So you, and I'm saying this to all parent carers, you may well have mental health difficulties yourselves. If you want to speak out about your experience of getting help for yourself, do I have a good GP who listens to me or helps me with my depression, whatever it might be, the Sun Network is there ready to hear from you about your experience. And they don't just listen to you and then go away. The people, the decision makers, the people with money, who can decide what needs improving, we have strong relationships with them. My colleague Lois Sidney, who manages the Sun Network, and I have meetings with the people with the money, and we say, here is a gap. And I don't want to talk about myself too much, but we were involved before primary care mental health services were developed, saying it's ridiculous. GPs are just referring thousands of people to community mental health services and then they're being sent back again. We can't carry on like this. So I'm just mentioning, I'm giving a plug for the Sun Network, and I also work for Healthwatch Peterborough, which is also a voice organisation. You can tell I'm very keen on the idea of people speaking up so that they can get better services. I wanted to mention that particularly, and actually that's probably enough for the moment from me, except to say I'll make sure my own email address goes out to people.
Please.
Well, Juditha already has my email address, so when she sends out our leaflet, Juditha, I'm very happy for you to circulate my email address, because this morning we've started to have a conversation, but we haven't progressed that too much. And sometimes people do prefer to talk about things one-to-one, and why not? So I'm very happy to do that.
Thank you very, very much, Jonathan. We will definitely share your email with all the parents carers. And I would like to say thank you also for having some people going out talking to the parents carer. That's absolutely wonderful. That will help us make our job a little bit easy as well. So definitely, we really appreciate that one, and thank you so much. No need to panic. All of you will get Jonathan's email. Yeah, as soon
I'm
as
just putting it. Actually, I'm putting it in the chat. Why not?
Yeah. If you could do that as well, that will be great as well. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for having you today. So definitely, these are very, very useful information. I'm sure all the parents care will be able to listen it via our Facebook page and YouTube page as well. We will share that with everyone. Yeah, because these are really useful information, and I'm sure people will be happy to hear it. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And the next person will be Rebecca. After Rebecca, I think Dave is there. We will, I think he will have something to say. So yeah, Rebecca, it's over to you now, please. From Living Sport. Yeah.
Hello. I have a presentation to share. So can I just share my screen? Bear with me 2 seconds.
Yeah. No worries.
Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Very clear. Yeah, thank you.
Some of you might know me from a forum before. So I'm just going to introduce Living Sport, who we are, what we do, and the current opportunities we have for people with disabilities or additional needs, and how you can get involved and what opportunities there are out there, really. But before I get started, I just wanted to caveat that although we're called Living Sport, we do work, as you says, around people's improving people's happiness and well-being. So it does link very nicely to this morning's discussion on mental health, that physical activity and even movement can support people's mental health. So it was interesting to hear this morning the talk, and we do a lot of work with mental health services around the county as well, and sort of health professionals and also community organisations, to ensure that we have a joined up approach, that there's opportunities out there so that people can be active in the way that they want to be active, and that can support your physical health and your mental health. So we do that by working, as I say, collaboratively with partners across communities, health and children and young people services. So we work across all ages, whether children and people, older people, middle age, as Jonathan said. And we work in place and also with communities, and we are looking basically to help people remove those barriers to sport and physical activity so they can be active in whatever way they can be. So if they've got a disability and they've got a particular problem of not being able to access something, we could help, but we'll also listen, and I'm also developing a strategy at the moment in terms of our disability work. So a lot of that is listening to people and finding out what the issues are, and then coming up collaboratively with our network with the solutions that can possibly help. So I'm not saying we have all the answers, but we are here to help and we are passionate about trying to help people. But if something's not working, we want to know about it to see what we can do, but not saying we've got the solution overnight always, but we'll always try and do something. Within the disability work that I do, with the partners we've got, we have something called the Ability Plus group, which is basically the County Disability Sports Forum, but it's not just that these days. It's a network of people that are interested in sport, physical activity, movement across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, mixing both the disability worlds and the sport and physical activity sectors, the leisure sector, etc. So you'll see there the mix of different people we've got, and actually we are connecting quite a lot with kind of disability organisations, community organisations that work with those disabled people, and connecting them to sport and physical activity and finding ways that they can get active and sharing that good practice, but sharing also what's going wrong and working together. So we have a good network of nearly sort of 190 strong organisations, and a lot of people in there that are passionate about making a difference for people. We communicate a lot through our monthly disability newsletter. So we have over 250 subscribers to that, and you'll see there that actually there's a lot bigger chunk of individuals on that use that to find out what's going on first. So I try and put on there first in terms of new activities or new developments that are coming on, and I know a lot of those subscribers that are part of organisations or part of groups do pass on information to their service users, their clients, their customers, so that we are getting out to a lot of people in terms of what's going on in the county in terms of activities, events, information, guidance, etc., workshops, all sorts of things we've put on there. And then we also have we call it the disability, it's actually called the inclusive activity map. I don't know why I call it disability there. Inclusive activity map, which is basically around 160 activities. So the providers, so the sports clubs, the leisure providers, and people that provide the physical activity from around the counties. That includes Peterborough as well as Cambridgeshire. It's not perfect, and as Jonathan was saying, these things go out of date, so I do try and keep it up to date and do try and keep it current, and there's always new things going on there. As I said, there's 40 different sports and activities on there, and 38 of which at the moment cover Peterborough, but we know it's only scraping the surface. And I do get a lot of inquiries from families, from individuals, from family workers, from social workers, etc., that are looking for activities, and the activity map is a great place to start. But also, if you've got any specific needs or specific interests that you can't find, your local club or whatever, then speak to us, because I've never been turned away from a sports club or a physical activity provision, so it's worth talking to us if they're not on there, one, to promote what could go on there, but also that actually there is other providers out there that will make provision if they know it's needed. A lot of the time we come across the challenge of actually the connection between people with disabilities or additional needs knowing activities exist, and actually those people that provide the activities knowing what to provide. and how to adapt and how to be how to include people with lots of different needs. So we do tend to be a very flexible network. There's lots of providers out there that are very flexible and willing to work, willing to talk to people and find out what it is that can help them join in. So yeah, please do check the map out, but also contact me if you can't find what you need or have any specific needs that you'd like to discuss. Also mentioned already today is Hey Peterborough, and we are on that as part of the physical activity offer, and also the inclusive activity map is actually now featured on that website too. So again, linking back to the fact that physical activity is really good for your mental health as well as your physical health. And obviously that does include children and young people as well as adults. So specifically for children and young people and our families work, which is very much increasing at the moment, partly because of COVID, we've been given the flexibility by our main funder Support England to not just deliver specific programmes, but actually work out what is needed on the ground very locally, so we can be very much more flexible and inclusive in terms of what we're offering. So just a taster of what we are doing in terms of children and young people is we are the county organiser for the school games you might have heard about. That's been around for many years now. It's actually a London 2012 legacy event that's still going on. That has always been inclusive, and we are always looking for ways of being more inclusive. And actually next year we're going to go back to where we were preschool games and actually have a disability specific event to make it a big event rather than just have inclusive events within main festival days. Obviously we haven't run any main festival days over the last 18 months, but there's been lots of stuff going on online and virtually with schools, and there's lots of things out there that we do with schools. And also, as alluded to with our funding, we have been able to be a bit more flexible. So we've come up with a couple of funding packages that people can come to us and actually say, actually, we've got this need, we think this will work, would you fund it? So we've got a virtually active package, which is obviously, as it says, a virtual activity, any virtual activity that is that can be provided. So I think that one's up to £500 for any sort of group or organisation to get something off the ground that would work for their community. And then we have a Inclusive Futures project, where basically it's up to the sort of organisation or the community group to co-produce it with young people and to come up with projects that really work to get people active. And that one's obviously more face-to-face rather than obviously the virtual offer. So I think that one's up to £1,000 because it obviously gives you a little bit more delivery in terms of kind of venue hire and etc. So with both of those, we are also developing a youth voice. So both of those have to go to a youth voice panel, and it's the young people themselves decide whether the groups or organisations get the money. So that's a good little development this year as well. We've been able to do a lot more in terms of that youth voice and really make sure any kind of children and young people's work is actually what young people want and need, rather than just putting projects on for them. And we are developing a lot more family focused work. We do have a project, a very specific project at the moment called Active Families, but I say because of the flexibility of the new funding, we are able to develop that work a lot better with focus and consultation and ideas from communities, rather than to say this is what the data is telling us, this is what we think we should deliver, we're going to try and land it. So we are moving along that journey of really making sure we co-produce and consult, and that's the same, as I said, with the disability strategy that we're currently developing. That we've done a lot of research. We are working through a working group, which is part of the network, as I just mentioned, the Ability Plus group, to make sure we do collaborate, use the expertise and knowledge in the network, but also come back and check and challenge and test with community groups, with people that are working with disabled people themselves, etc., to really make sure any work that we do is driven by insight, but also driven by the voice of whoever it is we're trying to target, to make sure it's the right kind of thing that's really going to hit their values and really make them be able to be part of whatever it is they're looking at. So just for me to finish off then, if you'd like to get in touch with me, happy for you to get in touch with me with general questions. But if you're interested in finding out more about the Ability Plus group and being part of that network, then please let me know. And also the disability newsletter, just simply email me your email address and I can just add you to the subscribers list, and you'll get that once a month. It goes out the first Thursday of the month, and that goes for any organisation that's on here as well. If you're interested in putting a story in or finding out more, then just let me know, because I'm never short of stories, but it's always good to have new partners on there explaining what different things are doing, so that, you know, we keep it fresh, but also make sure we're always developing and expanding who we're talking to and the network that we've got. So my details are there, but also increasingly any sort of children and young people and family work is my colleague Anna, who some of you would have met last time. Yeah, so if you contact me or Anna, then I'm happy to help. If there is any specific mental health, as we've been talking about mental health today, I do have a colleague as well who is leading mental health the same way as I do work with the disability stuff. She's leading on the mental health, because we understand that, as Jonathan said, it's a big thing. So actually, to really understand it and really focus on it, I have another colleague called Christine Sproul, who is in sort of the mental health networks and supporting people that way. So between all of us, we can really get to what people need to do and how they can use physical activity to support them.
Karen, lead from Caring Together. I hope you must have something to say about your organization here, please.
I do. I've got some slides that I was going to share.
Please, yeah, you can come forward and
can everyone see that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Karen Leet. I work at Caring Together, which is a charity that looks after all carers, both young carers, adult carers and parent carers, and I'm the awareness coordinator for them. So I just wanted to talk really briefly about some of the services that we have for parent carers. So first of all, we have our helpline. That's the first point of call for anybody. So people can self-refer to us and ring our helpline number. You can refer people on their behalf, as long as you have their consent to do so. And we'll take referrals from any healthcare professional as well. Part of what the helpline does for the parent carers is we work really closely with other agencies. So that may be related to the disability that the child has. It may be that we are referring to Pinpoint and Family Voice Peterborough. We offer magazines and newsletters, which our carers find really helpful. They have articles in the magazine, not just about Caring Together, but other agencies as well. And if there are any other agencies who'd be interested to have an article in our magazine, or even just a little advert with who to contact and briefly what you do, then please contact me. I can arrange that. And we also have a monthly newsletter. So if things do come up in between our magazine, which comes out quarterly, we can inform people in our newsletter as well. And we're always happy to include that from other agencies. We run groups and hubs for parent carers, and they're just starting to re-establish themselves now. And what we find is that parents have really good networks with each other and find a lot of support and reassurance by attending groups. And one of the things that we're looking at for the very near future is to perhaps have activities or days out just for parent carers. So one of the things we're looking at the moment is perhaps doing an afternoon tea group where people can get together who are all in the same circumstance. We do run day trips, which we're hoping to get up and running and perhaps invite parents to as well. We have the listening ear service, which really came about from COVID, where we wanted to have somebody on the end of a telephone who is or was a carer, who can just listen to whatever people want to talk about. So they can ring up, they can talk about something that's good that's happened, something bad, they can have a moan, they can perhaps practice a conversation that they may want to be having with relatives, but they want to practice that difficult conversation with someone first. And we found this is really good if people have been in isolation and haven't had much contact with the outside world. And in fact, we've just increased that service by 10 people to cope with the demand. So that's really popular. And again, that can be accessed just by ringing the helpline. We're really proud to say that we now have a counselling service available. And this counselling service is available for carers at every step in their journey. So whether that's pre-caring, in the middle of the caring journey, or maybe at the end of their caring journey, and for bereaved carers as well. And there's a counselling service of up to 9 sessions with our counsellor, which can be had. We're also really proud to say that we now have a parent carer lead. And the parent carer lead is, again, someone ring the helpline and then you can be referred to the parent carer lead. And she can help with things like the transition progress. What we know is that when children with special needs transition into the adult world, it can be a really daunting time for parents and a really worrying time and a minefield to pick their way through. It can also be a really exciting time for parents where perhaps they can start to think a little bit more about themselves and focus on themselves. So she will be able to talk through that transition progress and refer you. Some hospitals now have transition nurses who help with that transition if your child's attending hospital regularly. So help with resuming life as a parent, that could be advice about work opportunities, it could be advice about hobbies and just integrating yourself back into a world where you're not a parent carer, but you're the parent of an adult with significant other needs. We also have the what if plan, which you can obtain once your child turns 18. And that's a kind of provision for what if I couldn't care for them. So you register with us for the what if plan. We take your details, we take the details of your child that you're caring for. And if you were to be met by an illness or an accident, we can send out up to 72 hours of completely free care. So it just bridges that gap between something happening that you might not be able to care and then putting into place something that's a little bit more permanent. Ways that that's been used in the past year or so, we had a lady who fell over, broke her leg, and we got somebody out to care. It was a husband actually, that was just that transition period where she hadn't got anything in place until she could come out of hospital or put something more permanent in place. Our parent carer lead can also advise on benefits that you might be able to access, things like disability living allowance. So we're really proud that our parent carer lead is in post. And just one other thing to mention is our Hope programme, which is an online 6-week sessions for parent carers, where we just practice mindfulness, well-being, how to cope with stress. And people are telling us that they find that really useful, particularly during excuse me, particularly during COVID, when stress levels for everybody, but also parent carers, have been quite high. And we can also talk about respite care as well, which is something that obviously our parent carers parent carers need as well. So that's just a brief overview of our services. Thank you.
All right, thank you very, very much, Karen, for this useful information. Like I always repeating, we will definitely, this is already recorded and definitely will be shared on our Facebook and YouTube pages for parents, carers to access it. Yeah. So we got your contacts anyway, and your contacts will be shared with them as well when we are sending an email. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Just put that in the chat.
Yeah, please. Thank you very much for that as well. Thank you very much for having me on board. This is really absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So now is 12:18. We got less minutes now. I would like to give the floor to Judith. She got some useful information to share with you guys, particularly in terms of vaccination. Yeah. Judith, is over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. So I would like to share the message from Peterborough Voluntary Service, Kristen Alexander. She can't attend our meeting today, and she can't be here with us, and she asked to share that message. So this is about the vaccination clinics, and they are looking for the volunteers for this vaccination clinic. I would like to encourage everybody to make a volunteering and to make a help to these clinics. You will get paid £10.41 per hour for your time if you will be volunteering, and these clinics were decided to be created because of many local residents face barriers to accessing the vaccination due to not having access to the internet or smart devices, speaking English as a second language, or challenges with work flexibility that limit their access to the mainstream vaccination offer. So therefore, we are advertising temporary bank community engagement roles focused on supporting the vaccination program by encouraging vaccine uptake within specific in-person and online engagement events and activities. So the role will primarily involve delivering in-person engagement with local people about the COVID-19 vaccine in a range of formats, including pop-up events and door-to-door engagement, in line with the need to engagement with the key parts of the local community, particularly the working age population, residents aged 18-65. This will include some weekend work and evenings where needed, training on how to carry out effective vaccine confidence conversations will be provided at the outset, and PPE will be provided, masks and hand sanitizer, etc. on an ongoing basis. So the compensation for this position will be provided on an hourly basis at £10.41 per hour at a maximum of 20 hours per week. Weekly working hours would need to be agreed in advance, and a timesheet would need to be submitted on a monthly basis. So or it's like brief information and all other details if you are interested to know and to be involved in that role. So you can contact Family Voice Peterborough, Usman, me, or PCVS, or even Peterborough City Council about that, because they have the Think Communities Hub, Peterborough Hub. You can contact all of us, and you will get more detailed information about all of it if you are interested. And I'm encouraging all of us and others just to help in that hard work. So the contacts I can share also by emails also with all of us. Now I would like to say also thank you very much for your time attending our today's Seldom Heard Community Forum meeting today. Special thanks I would like to say to our speakers, to Emily, to Jonathan, to Rebecca, Rebecca, to Karen. Also, I would like to remind and ask everyone to fill out the feedback form. This is sent by Family Voice Peterborough to your emails. Please do that, because your feedback is very important to us when receiving the funding to help the parent carriers. And our next meeting is on 12th of August at St. Martin House. It will be a bit different meeting here because it will be a meeting with the mayor of the city of Peterborough. So please come with your information stands representing your community or your organization, and just talk with each other, represent your community or organization to others. The invitations will be sent very soon once all details for the events will be sorted. Again, thank you very, very much to everyone for today, and we hope to see you at St. Martin House in August. Thank you.